and welcome to a dark and quite chilly F1 paddock here in Barcelona. I'm Rosanna Tennant and I'm joined by Jolyon Palmer and Sam Collins, and it has been a great day. We have finally seen all 10 F1 teams out on track. We've been excited for this. Sam, you've been in the pit lane. Great to see you. Are you still as excited as you were this morning?
More so. There's so much to see. This has been just the most exciting, the most varied set of new Formula One cars I've seen in my entire life, and I'm loving it.
Oh, well, I'm glad you're loving it. We have been loving it. Jolyon, you've been out trackside as well today. Liking what you're seeing?
Loving it also. It's just great, isn't it? The cars look fantastic. The liveries on them are glinting in a nice day of sunshine as well. It's just really cool to be back.
Yeah, it has been fantastic. It has been a beautiful day here in Barcelona. Of course, a huge rules and regulation change for 2022, probably the biggest since 2014, 2009. And thinking back to those years, of course, we saw new champions being crowned. So anything could happen this year.
Absolutely. I think it's actually the biggest rule change in the history of the sport, really. It's absolutely fundamentally different to what it's been before. And I think it's going to reset the order. Everything's to play for.
Well, how exciting is that? If we look back over the course of the day, one thing that's really stood out, I guess, is reliability, Jolyon, and that has got to be a good thing if you're an F1 driver today.
It's been incredible. For the start of a new generation of cars, I mean, there might have been one red flag very briefly that I missed today, and that's about it.
Brief.
There's been 8 teams have done over 100 laps. Only 2 have had tougher days, Alfa Romeo and Haas, struggling with a few little issues. To be honest, you might sort of expect that for day one, but they've just been done over by 8 teams having really, really good days in terms of reliability.
It was fantastic. I spoke to Max Verstappen earlier on, and he said the aim for today was just laps. And he really was on a mission this morning, wasn't he, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Red Bull hasn't... It's a really interesting car, by the way. We'll look at...
Side note, it's going to become a massive side note.
Massively interesting car. But it just looks like they were just getting the job done. They weren't worried about pace and things like that. But that... was it 147 laps he did? That's 2 Grand Prix and a bit around here. That's incredible, and he'll be feeling that tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think quite a lot of pain in the backside. Well, let's listen to what Max Verstappen, our reigning world champion, had to say to me earlier on. Well, the reliability looked pretty much there. What was on the job list today, and what's the priority now going into tomorrow?
Just laps, getting used to the car, get a general understanding of how the car is behaving, and everything was working quite well today. So it's a good start, and of course tonight we'll look into what we can do tomorrow. Of course, check who's driving tomorrow, but it's just about doing a lot of laps and just getting a bit of mileage on all the parts to see if everything is holding up.
Lots of laps then for several drivers up and down the grid. And of course, we'll see some drivers tomorrow who weren't in the car today. But Jolyon, the teams that are kind of rising to the top already, who have you got your eye on?
I think there were a few standouts today. First of all, I went down to watch at some of the faster corners, and the cars still look really quick there, even if they've lost maybe a couple of seconds of performance compared to the higher downforce spec of last year. Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari flat out really early on through turn 9, which is impressive. So the Ferrari looked really good. The McLaren, I thought very early on, the McLaren looked very good. A really positive front end. Lando Norris at the wheel today, and just seemed to be able to position the car really nicely where he wanted, particularly at turn 7, where I went to have a little watch there. And he ended up topping the times for what that's worth at the end of the day. And then the Mercedes, I think, looked pretty good. However, right at the end of the day, I went down towards turn 1 and could just see it sort of bouncing or porpoising down the end of the straight, which might give them a bit of a headache, and maybe Sam can explain it.
Yeah, we're not talking about small aquatic creatures that look a bit like dolphins here. Yeah, it's worth Googling though. What this is this an aerodynamic phenomenon of these new cars? We used to see it on the ground effect cars, and you see it sometimes a little bit in sports car racing as well. It's basically when the downforce builds up, it's generated by the floor of the car, and the floor of the car is sucked down to the bottom of the circuit, or the top of the circuit, such a way that it kills the downforce, and then the car springs back up and then gets sucked back down, and it starts doing this porpoising motion like this, bouncing down the circuit. It feels absolutely horrible for an engineer to see it because your data is out the window, and it's horrible for the car.
Well, I was going to say, is it horrible for an F1 driver as well? Because what's it actually doing when you're approaching a corner? Because we were watching down at turn 1 together. Does it stop you from going for the braking point at the right time because you haven't got control of it?
I have to say, I've never actually driven with a really porpoising car. It looks really strange from the outside. I can only imagine it's just a horrible bouncing sensation from the cockpit that's uncomfortable, number one, because you're strapped in so tight and you feel every sort of movement of the car. And also, you're trying to pick a break point from a very high speed. It basically happens at high speed. You're trying to find a break point for turn one. It must be distracting. Where I was watching earlier on in the final chicane, Mercedes looked pretty nice and neat through there, but of course that wouldn't have been happening at that point. It's on the main straight, and that'll be something they have to work on.
And is that something that's an easy fix, Sam, or is it something they're going to have to work on between now and the official test in Bahrain?
I mean, you could take the springs out and put in a bit of scaffolding so you don't have any springs, but the tyres are still going to give you springs, so it's still going to bounce away. So I think the problem is actually quite a hard one to fix because it's down to the aerodynamic concept of the car. They're going to have to work really hard to fix this, and it could be a little bit of a problem for Mercedes going forward, but you know what they're like. They tend to fix things pretty quickly. This time last year, we were saying their car looked horrible, and they went out and won the first race.
Also,
well, exactly.
They had a very short filming day at Silverstone
And it was wet.
when the weather came in.
The storms.
And I wonder if that's just put them slightly on the back foot with that today, and other teams maybe have sort of gone through that with a more successful filming day.
Well, I have heard a few rumours about this, and I did hear that Alpine had a few moments on their filming day here in Barcelona recently, bits of the bodywork falling off in a few places, maybe taped up today. Mercedes, they were driving the middle of Storm Eunice, which wasn't going to be very helpful. AlphaTauri, they had very heavy rain in Misano when they were testing. And I did hear rumours that they might have had some porpoising as well, and they were struggling with the handling of that car. So a few problems across with just the weather, and that's the nature of winter testing. People come here and go into the proper first test next time out, and then they'll find that the temperatures are a bit more stable, and then we'll see what the cars can really do. These early runs, that's not really representative of what you're going to see when we get to the first race in Bahrain.
Well, it's quietening down a little, but there's lots of work going on in the motorhomes and in the engineering stations. As we were walking up to film, Jolyon, what's on the to-do list for a driver on the first day of running, do you think, overnight?
A lot of debriefing, way more than they would have anticipated because they did so many laps. I mean, 153 for Ferrari across the two drivers. So both drivers have got a lot to debrief. Every run, as always in testing, is meticulously planned, and they've probably gone through a range of aero settings or stiffness settings, ride height sweeps, all that sort of thing. And they've got to go through it and debrief it and try and hone in on basically a good idea of where to start for tomorrow. And there's some drivers that are not going to be driving tomorrow at all, like Max Verstappen, who's got a lot of time to debrief and then can put his feet up for a bit.
Absolutely. And we've seen parts coming in throughout the day, Sam. So parts going to be arriving overnight? Will it be something that continues to happen over the 2 days here?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people up and down here. You may see some people going and leaving the track behind us, but there's other people at the other end of the pit lane coming in. They'll be working through the night to change the cars, change the setup, in Mercedes' case, try and stop it porpoising, bring in new parts in. We've seen that they've got a new floor coming, but also the engineers, a lot of the engineers in these cabins in the back of the trucks, some of them will go back to the hotel. They're not going to bed. They're going to be looking at photos on their laptops. And these aren't holiday snaps. These are pictures of their own cars and everybody else's cars as well. There's a lot to see on these cars with a completely new set of regulations. It's debriefing for engineers as well. And they'll be talking back to base, sending pictures back and forth and trying to work out how to make their car as quick as it can be, as fast as they can.
Well, no tapas or cervezas for the engineers in the F1 paddock tonight. Perhaps for us. Jolyon Palmer, Sam Collins, thank you so much for your expert analysis as always, and we'll be back tomorrow after day 2 in Barcelona.